Welcome to episode 10 of Purpose Project, Stars of Responsibility. I am your host, Leslie Pagel, and in this episode, I sit down with Jim Obermaier. Jim is a seasoned leader with over 30 years of experience serving numerous sectors within the U.S. government. Jim currently serves as a Chief Operating Officer within the Indiana Department of Child Services. With so many years of experience working in and around different government agencies, I wanted to sit down with Jim to explore whether purpose in the government workplace mirrors that of purpose outside of the government workplace. And that's exactly what we do in this episode. Let's take a listen. Jim, thank you so much for being on Purpose Project. I am really looking forward to talking about how purpose shows up in the workplace.
All right. Thanks for having me, Leslie.
Let's start with getting to know you. Tell us a little bit about who you are personally and professionally.
Oh, sure. Personally, live here in Indianapolis. Been in Hoosier now for about 22, 23 years, which is kind of crazy. My wife's from here, so I'm a transplanted Hoosier by marriage. Have a background in a lot of different things, both professionally and personally. Very, very interested and very excited about history, very excited about, kind of learning different parts of the country and understanding how people show up given where they are, given where they might be from. Got a couple of kids. We like to think that our kids are somewhat interesting. One of them lives in Hawaii. I think she's been on this podcast before. And she works in the environmental and conservation space in Hawaii and also does outrigger canoeing competitively in Hawaii. She's been there about 4 or 5 years now. And then our son does software sales by day, but he has a pretty successful band by night. And they travel around the country and play indie pop. And they're actually, I was talking to him on the way over here, they're actually driving from Indianapolis to Milwaukee for gigs tonight. And they're going to end up in Colorado in a few days.
Very cool.
Yep, it's kind of cool. So I love to do a lot of reading, like to do some hiking, like to just kind of go out and travel a lot. And I'm a big urban hiker. I love to explore cities and just kind of, enjoy those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm. How about professionally?
Professionally, so I currently work at the state of Indiana. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of the Department of Child Services, which is the agency that works in child welfare, adoption, foster care, child support, and various other things in that universe. I've been around public sector world for the bulk of my career for about 35 years now, which is really hard to believe it's been that long. And I've been a consultant most of the time, been on both the business side and the technology side. So I'm one of those weird people who can kind of be conversant and able to operate in both spaces and kind of see the intersections between those two areas. Worked across state government. I've been in now, of course, child services. I've worked in revenue, so like tax collection. That's always a fun one that people are always like, ooh, you're a tax collector. Someone has to do it. Worked in corrections. I've worked in Bureau of Motor Vehicles. Wow. I've worked in transportation and worked in aging, worked in health and human services, and of course worked in general technology. So very deep background, and have had a couple of consulting stints in energy and pharmaceuticals as well. So pretty varied background, but the through line has always been in the public service space.
Okay. So I heard someone who's very curious, likes
very
to
much
explore, discover, strong family connections, professional work, mostly in public sector.
Correct.
Both kind of working within the government, but also outside as a consultant, working for. Okay.
Yeah, I had my own company for about 11 years. It was an independent consultant and integrated and partnered up with various folks depending on the needs of the project and the client. So
nice.
Yeah, so I've got a little bit of an entrepreneurial streak in me, and I tend to, when I'm on the inside, when I'm actually working for an organization, I tend to be a little bit of an intrapreneur. Trying to figure out ways to, hey, let's not do things the way we've always done them. Let's actually try to think about things differently.
Yeah. Well, I would love to probe into how and if purpose kind of influences that.
Sure.
But before we go there, a question I ask everyone
Okay.
is, do you have a life's purpose personally?
A life's purpose. That's a great question. Was thinking about that on the way over. And yes, I do. Life's purpose is always goes back to family. And being there for them and being the best version of me that I can be for them, and recognizing that over time, as families change, as we as individuals change, the core purpose stays the same. Some of the edges of it and some of the manifestations of it, depending on the season, change. So, kids when they're in their 20s are a little bit different than kids when they're in their, elementary school years or their high school years. My wife and I are going into 37 years of marriage this year, and marriages that are 37 years old are different than marriages when they're 5 years old. Great all seasons, but they have different needs. So the purpose shows up a little bit different every season.
Yeah, but it's always centered in family.
Absolutely,
and the way it shows up evolves as the family unit evolves.
Exactly. And family units, in my experience, they evolve a little bit too, and by that I mean not just the blood units, but the friends that come and go as well during the different times of your life and the different opportunities that the universe presents.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing your purpose with us.
Sure.
Let's dive into purpose in the workplace. Let's start pretty broad, and then we'll narrow in from there.
Sounds good.
From your experience and your perspective, how does purpose show up in the workplace?
It varies a lot. I mean, we all know we've worked with some folks that their purposes, they for whatever their world is, they show up because it's a job that they have and they need to come in, do the job, and it's a transactional experience from I show up and give you time, you give me money, we part at the end of the day, and then we do it all over again. That's one purpose, and that's a very, very great purpose.
Yeah.
For me, purpose in the workplace, especially given what I'm currently doing at the state with the Department of Child Services, is really about two things. One is finding ways to care for the folks that are on the teams that I work with. Teams, not only the teams that report to me, but the teams that I work with around our agency, around the state, and even outside of the state, because we have a lot of partners outside of the state. And figuring out how do I help make their lives easier? How do I make it easier for them to do their jobs so that they can serve the population that we serve, which is the most vulnerable Hoosier children and their families? That's one major purpose for me. Another major purpose is really figuring out a way to organize chaos, make systems work better. I didn't realize it when I was younger, but I've always been a pretty big systems thinker.
Okay.
And looking for ways to make the mousetrap work better. And how does all that fit together, and how can we smooth that out so that people can have a maximum experience so that they can show up and do their jobs in the most maximum way for their customers, whatever those customers are.
Yeah.
And that has always been something that I've been kind of just relentlessly drawn to. I'm the guy that organizes the silverware drawer. I'm the guy that makes sure that the plates are all in the right spot. I'm the guy that will walk by and straighten the placemats on the table, and those little things. I also try to do them with organizations that I'm involved with, not just unilaterally, but with the folks that are around the organization, and to facilitate conversations and facilitate ideas, and then to facilitate execution of making the placemat straight.
Yeah. So I heard purpose in the workplace is really about the role of the individual in their job, and it could be my purpose is to come and perform a job and get a paycheck, and it's transactional.
Yep.
But in your case, I was hearing more alignment with your strengths, your interests, your being, who you are, and fulfilling those in a workplace where you also benefit with a paycheck.
Well, absolutely. That is a thing. One of the things that I found as I've moved, further in my career and, kind of being closer to I think I did a calculation that if my career were a golf course, I think right now I'm on hole 15 or so. So kind of closer to the end of the course than the beginning of the course. But as I've moved further along, I've also really gotten excited about helping people that I work with figure out what excites them, what's their purpose in the workplace, and I think as you get further in your career, as maybe if you are privileged enough like I've been to move into leadership roles, it's a responsibility to help folks figure out what their purpose is. If someone is playing right field but they're a better shortstop, help them get to play shortstop. If someone's playing shortstop but they're a better first base person, help them get to first base. That is absolutely a responsibility. And if you can find people and help people get to those realizations and then to help actually make that happen for them, then guess what? What the organization does, how the organization does, the outcomes the organization achieves all raise.
Right.
They all get better. And guess what? People feel a little bit more comfortable.
Right.
And that means they're probably going to feel a little bit happier in their jobs, which is important.
I want to put an exclamation point on this, because what I heard is purpose is leadership. It is a leadership responsibility.
100%.
Whether you are the leader or an individual contributor,
100%.
it's still an opportunity, and it is how you get the most out of your team.
Yep, exactly. And it is the responsibility of someone, if you're again privileged enough to be in the leadership role, it is your responsibility to go to your team member. 95% of the journey is on the leader to go to the team member.
Right.
Not 95% of the journey is on the team member to come to the leader. That is absolutely anathema to the way that I believe it operates. And I certainly wouldn't operate that way.
Say a little bit more about this. So the leader going to the team member in terms of helping to understand their purpose, or
getting to know them, getting to know them as people. I really, really like to get to know folks. Hey, where are you from?
Right.
What's your world look like? What do you like to do outside of work? Get to know folks. What excites you? What's your hobby? If you weren't here, what would you be doing? If you weren't doing this job, what other job did you think you might be doing? What interests you? And in getting to know folks, it helps put together the fabric of, and organizations are never like one single piece of fabric. It's never a big blanket made out of a single piece of fabric. It's a quilt made out of the individual squares that are the different people in the organization,
love that visual,
right?
Yes.
So understand the makeup of the squares and how they fit together to make up the quilt, and you get a better thing that will keep you warm.
Right.
So it's really incumbent on the leader to go understand those individuals as people and then help understand, this is the type of team that we're working with. This is what excites them, because that influences what the direction one might choose to go in, and what might choose collectively to ideate on, and then to actually put plans together to go make it happen.
Yeah. So I'm hearing a lot about individual purpose. We're talking about individual purpose and how your strengths, you look at living those out, and then as a leader looking to understand that. There's also purpose of the business or purpose of the team. I think of that as the collective purpose.
Sure.
What importance does that have over this kind of getting to know the individual and their purpose? How do the two blend together?
Sure. So, sports metaphor alert. If the business is basketball, getting to know folks and understanding what their interest is. And if you find out that you've got a team of folks that are more interested in baseball, then that influences how that team can affect the purpose of the business. Probably not going to be the best basketball team, that you're going to have. I'm a whopping 5'6" on a low gravity day. I am not the guy that you're going to hire to go dunk a basketball. Ain't going to happen. Just not going to. And if you do, well, the good luck. That's a bad choice on your part. So you've got to understand who your team is and what they're interested in, and then bounce that up against what game you're playing,
Right.
what the purpose of the organization is, and try to find the best alignment as you possibly can. And sometimes it's going, this is what we think the purpose of the organization is. Where's the wiggle room to bring it closer to the team? Sometimes it's, hey, team, let me help you understand. Let's collectively understand the purpose of the organization, and how do we see ourselves as that team, as that quilt, show up to meet that purpose.
Right.
And then if we don't have a great overlap with it, or as much overlap as we need, what else do we need? How do we close that? How do we close that gap? How do we cover that with the blanket or the quilt a little bit better?
Right. So it's I'm envisioning two circles that start to intersect.
It's a
business
Venn diagram.
Purpose, yes,
100%.
And the more that they can overlap, the better. And
Sure.
sometimes it's a pulling of one side or a pushing of the other.
Exactly. And when you get a team that feels the purpose of, and then you get that intersection with their individual purpose aligning with the collective purpose, those circles can overlap more, and they can get a little bit more pliable, a little bit more flexible for the places that maybe they don't naturally intersect. They actually can kind of work it out a little bit so that it actually does intersect.
Right. Yeah.
So that's about, which is why it's so important for folks to understand, to know that you as a leader understand what they're interested in and what motivates them and what excites them and who they are as people. People want to be seen. We want to be seen. We are wired to want to be seen.
Right.
So it's important that that doesn't just happen at home. It happens at the workplace as well. And then when folks feel seen, not only will they see you feel seen better with you as a leader, they'll see each other better. And the best thing is when teams start working on stuff, and frankly, as a leader, I don't even know about it. Or when I do know about it, it's here's the good report of the thing that we just did.
They're proactive.
They're proactive.
And, they
they
take
start,
initiative.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
Exactly. And that is more likely to have when people understand their purpose and how that intersects with the organization's purpose.
Yeah. And as you're talking about that, I'm imagining these two circles. I'm imagining one approach for pulling them over is this dialogue. It's getting to know them. It's understanding them. It's helping them feel seen, heard, belong, like they belong, that they're important. And that helps them feel a stronger connection to the business purpose.
Exactly. And if you learn something about what they like to do outside of work, sometimes you find out that, wow, I know you'd love to do this thing outside of work. There's a thing over here inside of work that kind of similar.
That's right.
Hey, what about having that conversation? And then that makes them kind of, oh, wow, I like to do this over here and I get to do this at work.
Right.
And what is that old classic saying? If you find the thing you love, you never work a day in your life. Well, part of that is helping folks find that and helping folks see those opportunities in their lives.
Right. And sometimes it's not obvious. Sometimes it does require us to have dialogue, conversation in order to uncover those and create opportunities or whatnot.
Exactly. I've had team members. I have a couple of team members over the years that were extremely strong graphic artists, and they love that creative part. Well, every organization needs to communicate. Most of us are visual learners. What if you take the thing that you love to do in graphic arts and maybe we can apply it in the workplace a little bit?
Right.
Then you get to love to do that thing at the workplace while advancing communications and helping folks understand things.
Yeah.
Wow. How about that? Let's go do that.
Can we talk about purpose in government? When you're working for the
Absolutely.
government, how does purpose show up in the government?
Oh my gosh, that's a huge question. Well, government's big. So like any big organization, It's really a lot of different organizations that come together
Uh-huh.
to form the government, whether
Yeah.
you're talking local government, cities, counties, state level government like Indiana or other states, or national level government, and even there are international,
Right.
collectives, right?
Yeah.
So a, purpose is always there,
Yeah.
and each agency that makes up the quilt of the government has its own purpose. And what I've noticed over the years, especially as someone who's consulted in a lot of different types of government agencies, and I've consulted in 23 different state governments as well, so I've seen different ways to do government across the country at the state level. And a lot of times folks will select into agencies and their alignment with of their personal things that they're interested in with what the agency's stated objectives are, right? What their purpose is. So Department of Natural Resources, pretty good chance a lot of those folks are going to they like to be outside. They like to work in parks. They like to do things, in that space. You go to an organization like DOOR, you'll find people who like to work with numbers. They like to work with accounting and things like that. And those are gross generalizations, of course, but you'll probably find more folks with accounting interests in an organization like DOOR, like Department of Revenue, and you'll find folks that might be a little bit more, I want to do park things,
Right.
in DNR, Department of Natural Resources. So you'll see that, and you'll see that alignment of purpose with folks. And again, you'll see folks, especially folks that have been around government for a long time, they very much view themselves not as state employees, but as public servants.
Yeah.
A lot of folks that work in the public servants in the public space, they're making a choice to be there because it's interesting to them. I find the government work fascinating,
Right.
and I find it very, very compelling. And I like the purpose of it. I like the puzzle of it, and it's what gets me up every day. And it's like, oh, this is great. Let's go do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I'm hearing that the individual purpose varies depending on the agency, the organization, but naturally their purpose attracts individuals that have that interest. And those individuals also tend to view themselves as service-oriented.
Right. Exactly. That's a thing that you often find in that space is folks that really see themselves as public servants. And we were at a graduation for family case managers, and our director talked a lot about, hey, this is the beginning of a very big public service aspect of your career. Think of yourselves as public servants, not as DCS employees.
Right.
And that changes the mindset.
Right. Absolutely.
Yep.
So you've spent most of your career in government.
Yes, in and around government, yes.
Is it fair to say you've spent your career inside working for the government, but also outside in private sector?
Yes.
Any differences there?
Yeah, absolutely. There are differences. But I think at the end of the day, the differences aren't as great as folks think they are.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is that I've been very lucky. I've worked with large pharmaceutical companies and folks that work in pharmaceuticals. They're trying to deliver patient outcomes. They're trying to improve patients' lives. And folks are very mission-oriented to that. And that is not super far from the orientation of folks who work for the government, right? Public service. I've worked in the energy industry, and folks are trying to deliver the necessary thing that is energy in the way that our lives and our cities and our communities operate. So constantly, relentlessly looking to figure out how do we do this better? How do we maximize it? And that purpose is not super far from folks who show up to do public service.
Right.
So I haven't had the opportunity to work. I've never worked in large retail or anything like that. So I can't really speak to that. But I think when folks are finding their opportunities, finding how they show up in wherever their organization is, we all want to naturally see what's our purpose and how does that relate to what our organization is doing, and how do we feel about that?
Yeah.
So I think the through line there is that as people, we want that purpose alignment.
Mm-hmm. And what if we don't find it?
Great question. If we don't find it, boy, that's the thing that I would say is you've got to have that dialogue with yourself. You've got to have the dialogue with your team. You've got to have that conversation and say, is this where I should be? Do I understand my purpose enough? I would say, avoid the temptation for a knee-jerk reaction.
Right.
Because if you don't understand your purpose, then how do you know that you're really in the wrong spot?
Exactly.
So understanding that purpose is a really big thing.
Right. Yeah. So start with that kind of self-understanding and
100%.
awareness and
100%. Yeah, got to look inward, talk to the people that care about you, and just try to have that understanding.
Mm-hmm.
We've all been in those journeys, especially if when a little bit older, we've all had those conversations, those moments in our lives where we're like, am I where I'm supposed to be?
Oh yeah. I've had that many a times.
Well, you haven't lived if you haven't. So
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I have met people, and you mentioned this earlier, that the workplace enables them to do their purpose outside of work. So the workplace might be more transactional for them in terms of, I come to get a paycheck so that I can do this other important thing in my life. And because of that, work is really important.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I can think of a few folks that I've known over the years that they have their day job allows them to take care of a family member. And it is a very strong connection, and they love the day job. In some cases, they love the day job because of the day job, and that's the best place. But they love it because it also allows them to take care of that family member,
Right.
and that also is a strong purpose. There's nothing wrong with that.
Right. Absolutely.
Yep.
Why talk and bring purpose into the workplace? What are the benefits of purpose in the workplace?
I think at the end of the day, as people, we want to know that when we get up in the morning and when we go to bed at night, we've made a difference. I think we want that, and that difference can be really big. It can be really small, however you define big and small. I think understanding purpose in the workplace is that it's a way to collectively find a way to make that difference day in and day out. And I think that's really, really fantastic. I think that's what we as humans want. It's what we need.
Yeah.
And at least for me, that is why I've been in the government space as long as I've been in the government space, because I find it extremely compelling. I just always have.
Yeah. Is there a benefit in that to the business?
Private side business or just the business?
Either. So what I heard is, why purpose? Well, purpose is because as humans, we want to have meaning in our life, and we want to do things with our. So that feels very much, an individual outcome. But what's the benefit to the business of that for having individuals feel that way?
Because then they're motivated to make things better. They're motivated to help the business achieve its purpose, whatever that is. And I think collectively, when you've got, you think about, especially now we're kind of coming to the backside of winter here in Indianapolis, and we have ice storms, cars slide off the road. Where am I going with this? Well, do you ever see very often a car getting pushed out of an icy situation by one person? Nah, it usually is a few people that will come together and push it out, right? When those folks are showing up and they have that purpose, they can push the car to where it needs to be better.
Right.
That's a metaphor for when folks are showing up and understanding their purpose at work. Then if the business is to move the car, they can collectively move the car better.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and as you were saying that, I've, of course, visualized the car in my mind's eye and these people coming together and thought one of the things, so season 1 was all about people with a clear purpose who are actively pursuing it as individuals. And one of the things that I learned is they take responsibility. They don't let fear get in their way. They face fear. They do it scared, but they take the responsibility.
Sure.
And that's what I imagined in my head, these people coming together and taking responsibility.
Correct.
To help to solve the problems.
Yep.
You talked earlier about it's really great when the team starts to do it on their own. That's another responsibility example
absolutely.
too.
Collective responsibility.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Exactly.
Absolutely. And I think when folks find themselves in a place where their individual purpose intersects with organizational purpose, then that is where the stars of responsibility are born. Mm-hmm. And that starts creating a really great loop. You know, one feeds the other, and it just gets stronger and stronger.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what advice would you give to a people leader that has a group of people that may not seem connected to the purpose of the team or the company? Any advice that you would share for that type of person?
Sure. If you find yourself in a circumstance where folks may not be connecting with their individual purposes and then collectively with the organization's purpose, I think that's where you have to lean in as much as you can to understand the individuals, understand the people, help draw the line to the purpose. Storytelling is a very, very big part of leadership and helping folks make meaning of the circumstances that they find themselves in, and then the purpose that goes with that. So every one of us has our own story. Every organization has its own story, and realistically, we all have multiple stories, and organizations have multiple stories. Finding that and telling that and vision casting for that at the individual level, and then if you're lucky and if you work hard with good purpose-driven storytelling, you can bring folks closer together and get them to see that. It won't happen all the time. It won't be easy. There might be a few folks who just aren't going to get there, and that's okay, because their purpose and their story might be somewhere else.
Right.
So then your job becomes to help them find that in the best, most compassionate way possible.
Mm-hmm. So, and what I hear there, so one, get closer to them, really understand them, but also the intention is for them. You know,
Right.
if they can't connect, then help them elsewhere.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. That's right. And it's never about you. It's never about you. Mm-hmm. It's about the team that's in your care.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah, I got goosebumps on that one, because there's all types of leaders, right? And sometimes it does feel like it's about the leader and not always about the people. So leadership advice, it's not about you, it's about the group,
Right.
the collective group.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And guess what? Collectively, folks can do some pretty amazing things.
That's right.
The boundaries of human creativity and human ingenuity are limitless.
Yeah. Any other advice that you have on the topic of purpose in the workplace?
Find your purpose, read, explore, think, wander around nature, whatever it takes, constantly find it and recognize that as you go through life, your purpose might change a little bit, and that's okay. That's okay.
Absolutely.
And just recognizing that is really important, and leaning into it and being okay with that, So that's really all I got. It's nothing super insightful. Just be open, be flexible,
right,
and listen.
Thank you so much for joining. I have enjoyed this. I am taking a lot away from this. And I know our audience will too. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Leslie.
One thing stands out in this episode, and that is the profound responsibility that leaders hold for cultivating purpose within their organizations. This responsibility is true whether you're a leader within the government sector or outside of the government sector. In the workplace, purpose isn't solely about individual fulfillment. It's about collective alignment and shared vision. And leaders are responsible for guiding this journey, ensuring that purpose becomes a unifying force that drives meaningful impact. Jim, thank you for being on this show, and thanks to all of you for joining us on this episode of Purpose Project. May it inspire you to reflect on your role in nurturing purpose within the sphere of influence that surrounds you. Purpose Project is brought to you for education and for entertainment purposes. This podcast is not intended to replace the advice that you would receive from a licensed therapist or doctor or any other qualified professional.